Hello and welcome back. I took a little break from reading and we're going to get back into it. I might have to just do like a little mini recap of like what's happened. I just went to the Crest Theater in Sacramento with my mother-in-law and husband, and we saw the premiere, a sneak peek premiere of a show coming out on PBS called Miss Austen, and it is about Cassandra Austen, and it is set after Jane Austen has passed away, but we sort of go back and forth in time via letters. So Cassandra has found these letters, and she is reading them, and then we go back in time. And it's really cute and really, continues to have juiciness of the time. Of course, there's clergymen who are kicking women out of their houses because they only have it's only girls in the family and girls don't get anything, that sort of vibe. Very Austen-esque vibe, Regency era elite middle class vibe. But the Jane Austen Society of North America was there, and I am a proud member of the Jane Austen Society of North America now. and and it was really cute. There was a little backdrop of Pemberley, and you could take your picture with a little mock Pride and Prejudice book. And there was scones from Fat Cat Bakery. And what else was there? Scones and cookies and a little raffle. It was really cute. But I will say, I talked to three different people who said that Mansfield Park was their least favorite book, and then they reread it with kind of like a new frame, and it's now their favorite book. And they talked about how Jane Austen just really didn't like religion, which kind of came through in one of the Bertrams. I think one of the Bertrams was like, services were forced upon servants and the household members didn't have to go, but I think just her commentary through different characters is so cool, and you're like not liking a character because they're being a jerk, but then you're like, oh, this is like Jane Austen's point of view. I don't know, it's very cool to get a different perspective. She did have kind of like, this woman that I talked to kind of had a little gatekeepy, like, well, through the Jane Austen Society, I have all these books that I reference while I'm reading, and then I get to learn more about her. Like, there's clergymen in every single novel, which I was picking up on, and I did read an article about it, but I didn't like read the article about it. I just found it, and I haven't read it yet, which is fascinating to me. Her interpretation of a clergyman and clergy and that whole thing. And there's always like the Navy and militia are very apparent in her novels. And there's other books that you can read talking about her opinions about those things, and then that gives you a different frame of reference to come to the books of like, oh, she actually did not like organized religion. And so this commentary is about that through her characters. I'm kind of always like, where is Jane Austen in these books? So we are on chapter 17 of Mansfield Park, coming in with a fresh, new, fun little lens of that. And now that I'm part of the Jane Austen Society, I will be much more knowledgeable about what I'm reading. Again, it was 250 years ago. It's a different language. What are people thinking? What are people feeling? For some reason, Ireland is coming into my awareness, and like Ireland during this time. I think somebody, the Henry Crawford, who's just been a maniac flirt, destroying these people's lives, these women's lives, by flirting with everybody and turning these Bertram sisters against each other in competition for him, even though one of them is already supposed to be betrothed to Mr. Rushworth. He said something about an old Irish, he was just telling a story about an old Irish groom of his uncle's or something like that. So Ireland is coming into my awareness, and like what was going on in Ireland at the time. And I just looked up, and there, like, Ireland had just been united with the England, like the UK, in 1800, like it had just happened. And their whole plight during this, I mean, it just wasn't all. I was trying to look up articles like, what did Jane Austen think about the Irish? And she's so anti this society That certainly Irish people would be into that. I don't know. I'm just thinking about that as I'm reading these days as well. So, what's happening in this novel right now is we're going to be doing a play. I guess like holding plays. What else were these people going to do? There's nothing else to do. Except worry about who you're going to marry and what kind of fortune you're going to have. So we're holding this play. Mr. Rushworth has 42 lines, as we have many, many times have heard him say. That's like his only dialogue in this book is, I have 42 lines. And I think, oh yes, now I'm remembering, because it's been 4 or 5 days since I've read, and now I've got to remember. Fanny Price is not wanting to be in this play at all. And I think Tom or Henry was like, you've got to play this part. And it's super easy and you've got to play it. And she's like, absolutely not. And she said that because her cousin, who she likes, Edmund, didn't want to be in the play either and so against the play. But then he decided, he came privately to her and he said, I think I've got to do this. We don't want a stranger coming and playing this part who's going to be the lover of Mary Crawford's character in the play that we are putting on for some reason that nobody can agree on which play or who they're going to play. It's just all causing drama. And then poor Fanny was devastated. It was like the first time we ever glimpsed her alone for a whole chapter almost, where we're like seeing into her. She's still living in the attic. She's not living in the attic, but she's still very much, the attic is her own because nobody else wants it. So she still has like a safe place in this house, which thank God, because my goodness, this house feels so like, to her. They're doing a play. Fanny didn't want to be involved because Edmund didn't want to be involved. But now Edmund is going to be involved and she was devastated. And so I think that's where we left off. She just simply couldn't imagine. But she's getting like all of her like way of being in the world and her opinions from Edmund. You know? And at first I didn't think this novel was about Fanny. It's just like we're looking into the eyes of this other family through Fanny, but then the very next chapter after I think those words came out of my mouth was like all about Fanny. So I'm still trying to figure out what the heck we're doing and where this novel is going. So let's jump in chapter 17. Hopefully that's enough recap for me. Let's just read the last. This deeper anxiety swallowed him up. He went, but there was no reading, no china, no composure for Fanny. I think he had just left her room. I admire your little establishment exceedingly. As soon as I am gone, you will empty your head of all this nonsense of acting and sit comfortably down to your table. But do not stay here to be cold. Okay, he went, but there was no reading, no china, no composure for Fanny. He had told her the most extraordinary, the most inconceivable, the most unwelcome news, and she could think of nothing else. To be acting? After all his objections so just and so public, after all that she had heard him say and seen him look and known him to be feeling, could it be possible? Edmund so inconsistent. She's needing consistency in her life because her life has been so inconsistent, and Edmund was like her true north of like, this is what I need to follow. You've got to find your true north in yourself, and you have to be your own internal locus of control. That's what I'm working on right now. Thank you, Jane, for helping me. Was he not deceiving himself? Was he not wrong? Alas, it was all Miss Crawford's doing. Mary Crawford. These Crawfords, bad business. She had seen her influence in every speech and was miserable. The doubts and alarms as to her own conduct, which had previously distressed her and which had all slept while she listened to him, were become of little consequence now. This deeper anxiety swallowed them up. Wow, this deeper anxiety swallowed them up. Tell me about it. Things should take their course. She cared not how it ended. Her cousins might attack, but could hardly tease her. She was beyond their reach, and if at last obliged to yield, no matter. It was all misery now. Okay, we are in the movie Misery. Such a good movie. Check out Misery. It's terrible. Okay, chapter 17. It was indeed a triumphant day to Mr. Bertram and Maria. Such a victory of Edmund's discretion had been beyond their hopes, and was most delightful. There was no longer anything to disturb them in their darling project, and they congratulated each other in private on the jealous weakness to which they had attributed the change, with all the glee of feelings gratified in every way. Whoa! They congratulate each other in private on the jealous weakness which they had attributed the change. Whoa! He was going to be jealous of whoever was going to play the opposite part of Mary Crawford, so he's succumbed to this evil of the play. Whoa. Edmund might still look grave and say he did not like the scheme in general and must disapprove the play in particular. Their point was gained. He was to act, and he was driven to it by the force of selfish inclinations only. Oh, scandalous! Edmund had descended from that moral elevation which he had maintained before, and they were both as much the better as the happier of the descent, for the descent. Whoa. Do you remember in Sunday school when they hit somebody on the chair? And they said, okay, person on the chair, you try to pull somebody up to your level. And it was really difficult. And then when you were on the floor, they said, person on the floor, try to pull the person down from the chair. It's much easier to pull that person down than to lift somebody up. I remember that Sunday school lesson very well. These people are easily pulling Edmund out of his moral high ground, and they're loving it. The demons are in this house. We've got to exorcise the demons. Okay, there we go. There's a happy movie for you. Ace Ventura, one of them. I can't remember. They behaved very well, however, to him on the occasion, betraying no exultation beyond the lines about the corners of the mouth. Oh my God, beyond the lines about the corners of the mouth, and seemed to think it as great an escape to be quit of the intrusion of Charles Maddox, the person that they were going to go actually get to play this part. And Edmund was like, no, we can't have any strangers in the house, especially one who's going to be playing opposite Mary Crawford. And so that's why he's in the play now. As if they had been forced into admitting him against their inclination. To have it quite in their own family circle was what they had particularly wished. A stranger among them would have been the destruction of all their comfort. And when Edmund, pursuing that idea, gave a hint of his hope as to the limitation of the audience, they were ready, in the complacence of the moment, to promise anything. It was all good humor and encouragement. Mrs. Norris offered to contrive his dress. Mr. Yates assured him that Enocht's last scene with the Baron admitted a good deal of action and emphasis, and Mr. Rushworth undertook to count his speeches. Yes. Mr. Rushworth is continuing to count his speeches. 42. We know that he has 42 speeches. That's so funny. What else happened last time was that Mrs. Norris absolutely obliterated Fanny and said, how dare you, you insolent little ungrateful little wench of a girl, for not wanting to be in this play. After all we've done for you and after who you are and what you are. Mrs. Norris went off. Evil woman. Perhaps, said Tom, Fanny may be more disposed to oblige us now. Perhaps you may persuade her. Ooh, rascals. No, she is quite determined. She certainly will not act. Okay, Fanny is standing her ground, standing strong. She will not be pulled down from that chair. Oh, very well. And not another word was said, but Fanny felt herself again in danger, and her indifference to the danger was beginning to fail her already. There were not fewer smiles at the parsonage than at the park on this change in Edmund. Miss Crawford looked very lovely in hers, and entered with such an instantaneous renewal of cheerfulness into the whole affair as could have been one effect on him, as could have been but one effect on him. He was certainly right in respecting such feelings. He was glad he had determined on it. And the morning wore away in satisfactions very sweet, if not very fond. Yeah, see, this quote is like in the very middle of the paragraph, and we are assuming that Miss Crawford said it, And this is just like a change from her previous novels where it's not like, and then she said this. It's like we're hearing like passing comments from people. That's very interesting to me, and I don't know why. And I don't know why. And the morning wore away in satisfactions very sweet, if not very sound. One advantage resulted from it to Fanny. At the earnest request of Miss Crawford, Mrs. Grant had, with her usual good humour, agreed to undertake the part which Fanny had been wanted. Great. And this was all that occurred to gladden her heart during the day. And even this, when imparted by Edmund, brought a pang with it, for it was Miss Crawford to whom she was obliged. It was Miss Crawford whose kind exertions were to excite her gratitude, and whose merit in making them was spoken with a glow of admiration. Yeah, everybody wants Fanny to be very like, I am not worthy of being here. You should be very grateful, Fanny. Everybody's doing this. She was safe, but peace and safety were unconnected here. Ooh, truer words couldn't have been spoken about this whole thing, Fanny and Jane Austen. Peace and safety were unconnected here. Oh, that's such a writing. Her mind had never been... I really want to figure out why I do this. Her mind had been never farther from peace. Oh my God. Her mind had been never farther from peace. She could not feel that she had done wrong herself, but she was disquieted in every other way. Her heart and her judgment were equally against Edmund's decision. Wow. She could not acquit his unsteadiness, and his happiness under it made her wretched. He's happy that he's in this play now, and wow. She was full of jealousy and agitation. Miss Crawford came with looks of gaiety which seemed an insult, with friendly expressions toward herself which she could hardly answer calmly. Everybody around her was gay and busy, prosperous and important. Each had their object of interest, their part, their dress, their favourite scene, their friends and confederates. All were finding employment in consultations and comparisons, or diversion in the playful conceits they suggested. She alone was sad and insignificant. To herself or to others? And like, because she wasn't going to be in the play or because of Edmund? She had no share in anything. She might go or stay. She might be in the midst of their noise or retreat from it to the solitude of the East Room without being seen or missed. She could almost think anything would have been preferable to this. Mrs. Grant was of consequence. Her good nature and honourable mention, her taste and her time were considered. Her presence was wanted. She was sought for and attended and praised, and Fanny was at first in some danger of envying her the character she had accepted. But reflection brought better feelings, and showed her that Mrs. Grant was entitled to respect, which could never have belonged to her. Oh, yeah, they probably wouldn't treat her this well, even if she did accept the part. Wow. And that, had she received even the greatest, she could never have been easy in joining a scheme which, considering only her uncle, she must condemn altogether. Fanny's heart was not absolutely the only saddened one amongst them, as she soon began to acknowledge to herself. Julia was sufferer too, though not quite so blamelessly. Henry Crawford had trifled with her feelings, but she had very long allowed and even sought his attentions, with a jealousy of her sister so reasonable as ought to have been their cure. And now that the conviction of his preference for Maria had been forced on her, she submitted to it without any alarm for Maria's situation, or any endeavour at rational tranquillity for herself. She either sat in gloomy silence, wrapped in such gravity as nothing could subdue, no curiosity touch, no wit amuse, or, allowing the attentions of Mr. Yates, was talking with forced gaiety to him alone, and ridiculing the acting of the others. Just ridicule everybody else. For a day or two after the affront was given, Henry Crawford had endeavoured to do it away by the usual attack of gallantry and compliment, but he had not cared enough about it to preserve against a few repulses, and becoming soon too busy with his play to have time for more than one flirtation, he grew indifferent to the quarrel, or rather thought it a lucky occurrence, as quietly putting an end to what might ere long have raised expectations in more than Mrs. Grant. She was not pleased to see Julia excluded from the play by sitting by disregarded. But as it was not a matter which really involved her happiness, as Henry must be the best judge of his own, and as he did assure her with a most persuasive smile that neither he nor Julia had ever had a serious thought for each other, she could only renew her former caution as to the elder sister, entreat him not to risk his tranquillity by too much admiration there, and then gladly take her share in anything that brought cheerfulness to the young people in general, and that did so particularly promote the pleasure of the two so dear to her. I rather wonder Julia is not in love with Henry, was her observation to Mary. I dare say she is, replied Mary coldly. I imagine both sisters are. Both? No, that must not be. Do not give him a hint of it. Think of Mr. Rushworth. You had better tell Miss Bertram to think of Mr. Rushworth. It may do her some good. I often think of Mr. Rushworth's property and independence, and wish them in other hands, but I never think of him. A man might represent the county with such an estate. A man might escape a profession and represent the county. A man might represent the county with such an estate. A man might escape a profession and represent the county. I dare say he will be in Parliament soon. When Sir Thomas comes, I dare say he will be in for some borough. But there has been nobody to put him in the way of doing anything yet. Sir Thomas is to achieve many mighty things when he comes home, said Mary after a pause. Do you remember Hawkins Brown's Address to Tobacco in imitation of Pope? Blessed leaf, whose aromatic gales dispense to Templar's modesty, to parson's sense. I will parody them. Blessed knight, whose dictatorial look dispense to children affluence, to Rushworth sense. Will not that do, Mrs. Grant? Everything seems to depend upon Sir Thomas's return. Address to Tobacco. Look that up later. You will find his consequence very just and reasonable when you see him in his family, I assure you. I do not think we do so well without him. He has a fine, dignified manner which suits the head of such a house and keeps everybody in their place. Lady Bertram seems more of a cipher now than when he is at home, and nobody else can keep Mrs. Norris in order. Nobody else can keep Mrs. Norris in order, yeah. But Mary, do not fancy that Maria Bertram cares for Henry. I am sure Julia does not. Or she would not have flirted as she did last night with Mr. Yates. And though he and Maria are very good friends, I think she likes Southerton too well to be inconsistent. I would not give much for Mr. Rushworth's chance if Henry stepped in before the articles were signed. If you have a suspicion, something must be done, and as soon as this play is all over, we will talk to him seriously and make him know his own mind, and if he means nothing, we will send him off, though he is Henry for a time. Why is this all feeling like rhythm and rhyming right now? This is so funny. Julia did suffer, however, though Mrs. Grant discerned it not, and though it escaped the notice of many of her own family likewise. She did love still, and she had all the suffering which a warm temper and a high spirit were likely to endure under the disappointment of a dear, though a rational hope, with a strong sense of ill usage. Her heart was sore and angry, and she was capable only of angry consolations. The sister with whom she was used to be on easy terms was now become her greatest enemy. They were alienated from each other, and Julia was not superior to the hope of some distressing end to the attentions which were still carrying on there. Some punishment to Maria for conduct so shameful towards herself as well as towards Mr. Rushworth. With no material fault of temper or difference of opinion to prevent their being good friends while their interests were the same, the sisters, under such a trial as this, had not affection or principle enough to make them merciful or just, to give them honour or compassion. Maria felt her triumph and pursued her purpose, careless of Julia. And Julia could never see Maria distinguished by Henry Crawford without trusting that it would create jealousy and bring a public disturbance at last. Fanny saw and pitied much of this in Julia, but there was no outward fellowship between them. Julia made no communication, and Fanny took no liberties. They were two solitary sufferers, or connected only by Fanny's consciousness. Julia is not even conscious of Fanny, and Fanny is only conscious of her, but they are not going to share in their misery and suffering. I'm sure Julia's like, Fanny wouldn't even understand, because she's stupid. Oh, these people. The inattention of the two brothers, and the aunt to Julia's discomposure, and their blindness to its true cause, must be imputed to the fullness of their own minds. They were totally preoccupied. Tom was engrossed by the concerns of his theatre, and saw nothing that did not immediately relate to it. Edmund, between his theatrical and his real part, between Miss Crawford's claims and his own conduct, between love and consistency, was equally unobservant, and Mrs. Norris was too busy in contriving and directing the general little matters of the company, superintending their various dresses with economical expedient, for which nobody thanked her, and saving with delighted integrity half a crown here and there to the absent of Sir Thomas, to have leisure for watching the behaviour or guarding the happiness of his daughters. Wow. Mrs. Norris is a busy lady. Let's do chapter 18. I'm feeling like reading today, so we're going to keep going to chapter 18. Everything was now in a regular train. Theatre, actors, actresses, and dresses were all getting forward. But though no other great impediments arose, Fanny found, before many days were past, that it was not all uninterpreted enjoyment to the party themselves, and that she had not to witness the countenance of such unanimity and delight as had been almost too much for her at first. Yeah, if you're a theater kid, it's taking me back to theater kid days. If you're a theater kid, you're like in it and you're loving it. And it's almost like you're trauma bonding with these people of like, we have 14 shows today and 14 shows tomorrow night. And then it's Saturday, so we'll have 17 shows. And, but when you're outside of it, you're like, this is a lot, and people are being crazy. Who are these monsters on the stage here? Who are these divas in high school and college? Who are these divas at community college that are insane? I don't know, it was too much for her at first, yes. Everybody began to have their vexation. Edmund had many. Entirely against his judgment, a scene painter arrived from town and was at work, much to the increase of the expense, and what was worse, of the eclat of their proceedings. And his brother, instead of being really guided by him as to the privacy of the representation, was giving an invitation to every family who came in his way. Oh, they were going to make it this private thing, and Tom's like, everybody can come. Or Edmund said that. Tom himself began to fret over the scene painter's slow progress, and to feel the miseries of waiting. I like that. The miseries of waiting. He had learned his part, all his parts, for he took every trifling one that could be united with the butler, and began to be impatient to be acting. And every day thus unemployed was tending to increase his sense of the insignificance of all his parts together, and make him more ready to regret that some other play had not been chosen. Fanny, being always very courteous listener, and often the only listener at hand, came in for the complaints and the distresses of most of them. Wow. Everybody's saying, you chose right not to be in this play, Fanny. She knew that Mr. Yates was in general thought to rant dreadfully, that Mr. Yates was disappointed in Henry Crawford, that Tom Bertram spoke so quick he would be unintelligible. Me, when I first started this project, I was like, get read! That Mrs. Grant spoiled everything by laughing, that Edmund was behindhand with his part, and that it was misery to have anything to do with Mr. Rushworth, because he only says how many lines he's supposed to be memorizing and never memorizes them. I have 42 speeches. Who was wanting a prompter through every speech. Oh no. The guy in the play who goes, line? And then says his line and then goes, okay, next line? This is fun. She knew also that poor Mr. Rushworth could seldom get anybody to rehearse with him. His complaint came before her as well as the rest, and so decided to her eye was her cousin Maria's avoidance of him, and so needlessly often the rehearsal of the first scene between her and Mr. Crawford, that she had soon all the terror of other complaints from him. So far from being all satisfied and all enjoying, she found everybody requiring something they had not, and giving occasion of discontent to the others. Everybody had a part, either too long or too short. Nobody would attend as they ought. Nobody would remember on which side they were to come in. Nobody but the complainer would observe any directions. Fanny believed herself to derive as much innocent enjoyment from the play as any of them. Henry Crawford acted well, and it was a pleasure to her to creep into the theatre and attend the rehearsal of the first act, in spite of the feelings it excited in some speeches from Maria. Maria, she also thought, acted well, too well, and after the first rehearsal or two, Fanny began to be their only audience, and sometimes as prompter, sometimes as spectre, was often very useful. Yeah, there's plenty of somebody not in the play to do. There's plenty for something who is not in the play to do. She's going to be useful, which is fine. As far as she could judge, Mr. Crawford was considerably the best actor of all. He had more confidence than Edmund, more judgment than Tom, more talent and taste than Mr. Yates, who is an actor. Whoa. She did not like him as a man, but she must admit him to be the best actor. And on this point, there were not many who differed from her. Mr. Yates, indeed, exclaimed against his tameness and insipidity, yes, he says. And the day came at last when Mr. Rushworth turned to her with a black look and said, "Do you think there is anything so very fine in all this? For the life and soul of me, I cannot admire him. And between ourselves, to see such an undersized little mean-looking man set up for a fine actor is very ridiculous in my opinion." Oops. From this moment, there was a return of his former jealousy, which Maria, from increasing hopes of Crawford, was at little pains to remove, and the chances of Mr. Rushworth ever attaining to the knowledge of his 42 speeches became much less. Ever attaining to the knowledge of his 42 speeches. As to his ever making anything tolerable of them, nobody had the smallest idea of that except his mother. She, indeed, regretted that his part was not more considerable, and deferred coming over to Mansfield till they were forward enough in their rehearsal to comprehend all his scenes. But the others aspired at nothing beyond his remembering the catchword, and the first line of his speech, and being able to follow the prompter through the rest. Fanny, in her pity and kind-heartedness, was at great pains to teach him how to learn, giving him all the helps and directions in her power, trying to make an artificial memory for him, and learning every word of his part herself, but without his being much the forwarder. She said, "I'll just put on a man outfit and dress up as man, and I'll just play this part." Many uncomfortable, anxious, apprehensive feelings she certainly had, but with all these and other claims on her time and attention, she was as far from finding herself without employment or utility amongst them as without a companion in uneasiness. quite as far from having no demand on her leisure as on her compassion. The gloom of her first anticipations was proved to be unfounded. She was occasionally useful to all. She was perhaps as much at peace as any. At peace, got it. Being in a play and a musical gives you the butterflies. It's like, how much butterflies can you tolerate? How many trips to the bathroom are you going to take before this play? We'll see. There was a great deal of needlework to be done, moreover, in which her help was wanted, and that Mrs. Norris thought her quite as well off as the rest was evident by the manner in which she claimed. "Come, Fanny," she cried, "these are fine times for you, but you must not always be walking from one room to the other and doing the lookings-on at your ease in this way. I want you here. I have been slaving myself till I can hardly stand to contrive Mr. Rushworth's cloak without sending for any more satin, and now I think you may give me your help in putting it together. There are but 3 seams. You may do them in a trice. It would be lucky for me if I had nothing but the execute part to do. You are best off, if I can tell you, but if nobody did more than you, we should not get on very fast. There's like so many like double negatives that I can't even tell if that's a compliment or not. Is that a compliment? But if nobody did more than you, we should not get on very fast. Fanny took the work very quietly, without attempting any defence, but her kinder Aunt Bertram observed on her behalf. "One cannot wonder, sister, that Fanny should be delighted. It is all new to her, you know. You and I used to be very fond of plays ourselves, and so am I still. And soon as I am a little more at leisure, I mean to look in at their rehearsals too. What is the play about, Fanny? You have never told me." "Oh, sister, pray do not ask her now, for Fanny is not one of those who can talk and work at the same time. It's about lovers' vows." "I believe," said Fanny to her Aunt Bertram, "there will be 3 acts rehearsed tomorrow evening, and it will give you an opportunity of seeing all the actors at once." "You had better stay till the curtain is hung," interposed Mrs. Norris. "The curtain will be hung in a day or 2. There's very little sense in a play without a curtain. And I am much mistaken if you do not find it draw up into your very handsome festoons. What? And I am much mistaken if you do not find it draw up into very handsome festoons. I'm going to look up the word festoons, and maybe that'll help me freaking understand what this sentence means. Sometimes it is such a foreign language that I'm holding on by a thread. And what's a festoon, eh? Festoon, a decorative garland or wreath often made of flowers, foliage, and ribbons that hangs on a loop or curve between 2 points. Okay. Draw up into very handsome festoons. Okay, I see. We're going to make it look like a handsome festoon, so you should wait until see the curtains it up. This is great. Great. Lady Bertram seemed quite resigned to waiting. Fanny did not share her aunt's composure. She thought of the morrow a great deal, for if the 3 acts were rehearsed, Edmund and Miss Crawford would then be acting together for the first time. The 3rd act would bring a scene between them which interested her most particularly, and which she was longing and dreading to see how they would perform. She always does that, like, longing and dreading together. It's very, very real. The whole subject of it was love and marriage of love. A marriage of love was to be described by the gentleman, and very little short of a declaration of love be made by the lady. She had read and read the scenes again with many painful, many wondering emotions, and looked forward to their representation of it as circumstance almost too interesting. She did not believe they had yet rehearsed it, even in private. Ooh, are they privately rehearsing this love scene together? The morrow came. The plan for the evening continued, and Fanny's consideration of it did not become less agitated. She worked very diligently under her aunt's directions, but her diligence and her silence concealed a very absent, anxious mind. and about noon she made her escape, with her work, to the east room, that she might have no concern in another, and as she deemed it most unnecessary rehearsal for the first act, which Henry Crawford was just proposing, desirous at once of having her time to herself, and of avoiding the sight of Mr. Rushworth. A glimpse as she passed through the hall of the two ladies walking up from the parsonage made no change in her wish of retreat, and she worked and meditated in the east room, undisturbed, for a quarter of an hour, when a gentle tap at the door, was followed by the entrance of Miss Crawford. Am I right? Yes, this is the east room. My dear Miss Price, I beg your pardon, but I have made my way to you on purpose to entreat your help. Miss Crawford, Mary, okay. Fanny, quite surprised, endeavored to show herself mistress of the room by her civilities, and looked at the bright bars of her empty grate with concern. She's tending to the fire of her. She's mistress of her own room. With her civilities. Thank you. I'm quite warm, very warm. Allow me to stay here a little while. I do have the goodness to hear my third act. I have brought my book, and if you would but rehearse it with me, I should be so obliged. I came here today intending to rehearse with Edmund by ourselves against the evening, but he is not in the way, and if he were, I do not think I could go through it with him, till I have hardened myself a little, for really there is a speech or two. You will be so good, won't you? Fanny was most civil in her assurances, though she could not give them in very steady voice. Have you ever happened to look at the part I mean? Continued Miss Crawford, opening her book. Here it is. I did not think much of it at first, but upon my word, there, look at that speech, and that, and that. How am I ever to look him in the face and say such things? Could you do it? But then he is your cousin, which makes all the difference. You must rehearse it with me, that I may fancy you him, and get on by degrees. You have a look of his sometimes. I have. I will do my best in the greatest readiness, but I must read the part, for I can say very little of it. None of it, I suppose. You ought to have the book, of course. Now for it. We must have 2 chairs at hand for you to bring forward to the front of the stage. There. Very good schoolroom chairs, not made for a theatre, I dare say, much more fitted for the little girls to sit and kick their feet against when they are learning a lesson. What would your governess and your uncle say to see them used for such a purpose? Could Sir Thomas look in upon us just now, he would bless himself, for we are rehearsing all over the house. Yates is storming away in the dining room. I heard him as I came upstairs, and the theatre is engaged, of course, by those indefatigable rehearsers, Agatha and Frederick. If they are not perfect, I shall be surprised. By the by, I looked in upon them 5 minutes ago, and it happened to be exactly at one of the times when they were trying not to embrace, and Mr. Rushworth was with me. I thought he began to look a little queer, so I turned it off as well as I could by whispering to him, We shall have an excellent Agatha. There is something so maternal in her manner, so completely maternal in her voice and countenance. Was not that well done of me? He brightened up directly, not for my soliloquy. So Agatha and Frederick is played by Henry Crawford, and Agatha is played by Mariah. And Mr. Rushworth's looking in like, ugh. She began, and Fanny joined in with all the modest feeling with the idea of representing Edmund was so strongly calculated to inspire, but with looks and voice so truly feminine as to be no very good picture of a man. With such an Anhalt, however, Miss Crawford had courage enough, and they had got through half the scene when a tap at the door brought a pause, and the entrance of Edmund the next moment suspended it all. Surprise, consciousness, and pleasure appeared in each of the 3 on this unexpected meeting, and as Edmund was come on the very same business as had brought Miss Crawford, consciousness and pleasure were likely to be more than momentary in them. He too had his book and was seeking Fanny to ask her to rehearse with him and help him prepare for the evening without knowing Miss Crawford to be in the house, and great was the joy and animation of being thus thrown together, of comparing schemes and sympathizing in praise of Fanny's kind offices. She could not equal them in their warmth. Her spirits sank under the glow of theirs, and she felt herself becoming too nearly nothing to both to have any comfort in having been sought by either. They must now rehearse together. Edmund proposed, urged, entreated it, till the lady, not very unwilling at first, could refuse no longer. And Fanny was wanted only to prompt and observe them. Oh my God! She was invested indeed with the office of judge and critic, and earnestly desired to exercise it and tell them all their faults. But from doing so, every feeling within her shrank. She could not, would not, dared not attempt it. Had she been otherwise qualified for criticism, her conscience must have restrained her from venturing at disapprobation. She believed herself to feel too much of it in the aggregate of honesty or safety in particulars. To prompt them must be enough for her, and it was sometimes more than enough, for she could not always pay attention to the book. In watching them, she forgot herself, and agitated by the increasing spirit of Edmund's manner, had once closed the page and turned away exactly as he wanted help. It was imputed to very reasonable weariness, and she was thanked and pitied, but she deserved their pity more than she hoped they would ever surmise. At last the scene was over. Oh my God, just you in a room watching two people act a scene for the first time. Oh my God. Who you love the man, you're in love with the man. Oh my God. At last the scene was over, and Fanny forced herself to add her praise to the compliments each was giving the other. And when again alone and able to recall the whole, she was inclined to believe their performance would indeed have such nature and feeling in it that must ensure their credit and make it a very suffering exhibition to herself. Whatever might be its effect, however, she must stand the brunt of it again that very day. The first regular rehearsal of the 3 first acts was certainly to take place in the evening. Mrs. Grant and the Crawfords were engaged to return for that purpose as soon as they could after dinner, and everyone concerned was looking forward with eagerness. There seemed a general diffusion of cheerfulness on the occasion. Tom was enjoying such an advance towards the end. Edmund was in spirits from the morning's rehearsal, and little vexation seemed everywhere smoothed away. All were alert and impatient. The ladies moved soon, the gentlemen soon followed them, and with the expectation of Lady Bertram, Mrs. Norris, and Julia, everybody was in the theatre at an early hour, and having lighted it up as well as its unfinished state admitted, were waiting only the arrival of Mrs. Grant and the Crawfords to begin. They did not wait long for the Crawfords, but there was no Mrs. Grant. She could not come. Dr. Grant, professing an indisposition for which he had little credit with his fair sister-in-law, could not spare his wife. Dr. Grant is ill, said she with mock solemnity. He has been ill ever since he did not eat any of the pheasant today. He fancied it tough, sent his plate away, and has been suffering ever since. Here was disappointment. Mrs. Grant's not attendance was sad indeed. I knew this was going to happen. I should have said it out loud. Mrs. Grant's not going to be able to go, and Fanny's going to have to do it anyway. I knew it. Her pleasant manners and cheerful conformity made her always valuable amongst them, but now she was absolutely necessary. They could not act, they could not rehearse with any satisfaction without her. The comfort of the whole evening was destroyed. What was to be done? You guessed it. Spoiler alert. Tom, as cottager, was in despair. After a pause of perplexity, some eyes began to be turned towards Fanny, and a voice or two to say, if Miss Price would be so good as to read the part. She was immediately surrounded by supplications. Everybody asked it. Even Edmund said, do, Fanny, if it's not very disagreeable to you. But Fanny still hung back. She could not endure the idea of it. Why was not Miss Crawford to be applied to as well? Or why had she not rather gone to her own room, as she had felt to be safest instead of attending the rehearsal at all. She had known it would irritate and distress her. She had known it her duty to keep away. She was properly punished. You have only to read the part, said Henry Crawford with renewed entreaty. And I do believe she can say every word of it, added Maria, for she could but put Mrs. Grant's right the other day in 20 places. Fanny, I am sure you know the part. Fanny could not say that she did not, and as they all preserved, and as Edmund repeated his wish, and with a look of even fond dependence on her good nature, she must yield. She would do her best. Everybody was satisfied, and she was left to the tremors of a most palpitating heart, while the others prepared to begin. They did begin, and being too much engaged in their own noise to be struck by an unusual noise in the other part of the house, had proceeded some way when the door of the room was thrown open, and Julia, appearing at it with her face all aghast, exclaimed, "My father is come. He is in the hall at this moment." Jane Austen loves a cliffhanger. That is so fun. Do you think these came out in volumes and somebody had to wait for the second volume to know what was going to happen? Is it? I cannot watch shows as they come out. Like, I wait until they're all done so I can just watch it at my own leisure. I hate waiting. There's a line, something about waiting. Oh my god. Oh my god. Join me next time to see what happens, how Sir Thomas freaking handles this. Wow. What an epic end to Volume 1, Jane Austen. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to hear me read. And I appreciate you all. And thank you yet again from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this. Happy reading and ta-ta.